The ship Omen's Hope emerged from the final jump node with a shudder and a ripple of light, like an ember dropped into a pond of stars. It was Earth's finest vessel, though finest was a relative term. To its passengers, it was a miracle of fusion engines, carbon-woven alloys, and centuries of global cooperation. To the galaxy watching, it resembled a tin can with delusions of grandeur. Inside the observation deck, the 5-member First Contact team stood in silent awe as the summit station unfolded before them. Concordia Eternum. A construct the size of Neptune's moon, built into the orbit of a dying blue giant. Its surface shimmered with fractal geometries, rotating rings, and spirals of bioluminescent coral tech. Beams of living light flowed between towers. Gravity-defying structures pulsed with alien physics and unseen laws. Commander Evelyn Rowe turned away from the viewport. Final suits check. We're docked in 10. Behind her, biologist Marcus Lee muttered under his breath, and then we get laughed off the galactic stage. His voice didn't hide the dread. None of theirs did. Anthropologist Shreya Das adjusted her collar and replied quietly, that's assuming they bother laughing. They might just euthanize us for being cute. The joke didn't land. They had all read the orientation reports. Humanity was a Category 4 emergent species, barely past planetary adolescence. The Concorde had only extended an invitation as a political curiosity, following Earth's reckless broadcast of its global consciousness milestone, a neural AI coalescing out of uncontrolled internet chatter. The team knew they weren't equals here. They were spectacle. As the docking clamps hissed and the umbilical sealed, the lights dimmed in ceremonial sync. Across the galaxy, millions watched via transsensory networks. Earth's broadcast, by contrast, was limited to encrypted relays aimed back at Lunar Command. Nobody on Earth was seeing this live. Too risky. Too much pride at stake. The doors opened. A scent filled the air. Impossible to name, like electric honey mixed with memory. The corridor stretched outward into impossibly shifting dimensions. It led to the council chamber at the station's heart. They walked. Their boots echoed against surfaces that weren't quite solid. Walls shimmered with embedded intelligence. Sentient pollen swirled through the air, forming curious glyphs in their wake. A floating orb, some kind of guide organism, hovered beside them, chiming softly in what translated as bureaucratic monotone. Delegates from Sol 3. Classification, unenhanced. Unweaved. Biologically unmodified. Permit status, probationary observation with vocal privilege. In other words, you're here but barely. They arrived at the Nexus Hall, a vast amphitheater shaped like a 1,000-petaled bloom. Each petal was a floating platform for a member species. The humans stood alone on a hovering disk at the base of the structure, surrounded by rings upon rings of ancient galactic empires. The Corythians, plasma beings inside crystalline shells, glistened in starlight, their words like music fracturing into light. The Telchi, cold-blooded tacticians from a gas giant, shimmered like oil on water. The Tarvek hive, a billion-strong mind coalesced into a single shifting form, pulsed with bioelectric warnings. Above all, the High Concorde chair, a tripartite consciousness known as Aeonvel, sat in floating meditation, blinking only once every solar minute. The humans stood still as the chamber reacted. A wave of soft murmurs, subvocal pulses, psychic amusement. The feeling was unmistakable. Laughter. Polite but not kind. A species of sweat gland bipeds with a 120-year life expectancy had walked into the court of the immortals, dragging behind them myths, languages, trauma, and fashion. A Corythian envoy shimmered and spoke first, a translation flowing gently into the humans' earpieces. We welcome Sol 3 to the Concorde. Your presence adds charm. A second voice, deep and full of too many vowels, followed from the Telchi. It is rare that the Council encounters organisms so raw, but novelty is a welcome distraction. Then came the Tarvek, whose words required visual projection. Their language wasn't sound but movement. A burst of color patterns danced above them, translated as, the protein things bring their carbon traditions. Let us taste their worldview before sterilizing it. Commander Rowe remained composed. That was the point of the exercise, wasn't it? The assessment gauntlet was a test not of strength, but reaction. How a species handled embarrassment, humiliation, scrutiny. Whether they would crack, cry, or lash out. Few passed. She stepped forward, bowed slightly, and activated her translator. We come with humility and with the hope of peace. It was textbook diplomacy. But it only made the laughter grow. Back in Earth's orbit, the viewing room at Lunar Command remained tense. General Noru muttered to her aide, We should have sent the AI. At least it wouldn't take it personally. But down on the council floor, Commander Rowe didn't flinch. The delegation behind her stayed in formation, hands folded, eyes forward. They were surrounded by beings who could shift probability, command stars, or live across multiple timelines. Yet none of those species had once been prey, climbed from the mud, built art from trauma, or told stories around fire just to hold back the dark. Rowe knew that. But this wasn't the moment to explain. Not yet. Let them laugh. She turned back to her team. Remember the plan. Don't correct them. Don't defend us. Let them talk. Marcus frowned. And when they ask what makes us worth their attention, Commander Rowe gave the faintest smile. We tell them the truth. Just not yet. Behind them, a holographic banner unfurled in the air. It bore Earth's chosen symbol, a spiral galaxy with 5 figures climbing a winding staircase, one of them holding a match to light the path. The match was still burning. And they hadn't even struck it yet. The council chamber pulsed with shifting light as Aeon Vel, the triune consciousness that presided over the galactic concord, floated downward toward the center of the petaled amphitheater. Earth's delegation remained on their platform, a 5-meter-wide disk suspended by invisible graviton threads, still and silent. All around them, thousands of species observed from their elevated perches, some in bodies of flesh, some in crystalline forms, others projecting only light or thought. Each of them had passed through this trial. Each of them had earned their voice. Earth had not. Unvel's voice came not as sound, but as layered sensation, part vibration, part memory, part scent. The translator neural implants filtered it into language. Per custom, species newly emerged into interstellar awareness must pass through the gauntlet of evaluation. This trial is not to test strength, nor culture, nor philosophy. Only stability. Only a species prepared to see itself through the eyes of others may join the concord as equals. The humans already knew this. It had been drilled into them in the diplomatic prep modules. But knowing didn't prepare you for the feeling, for being examined like an insect, probed not for your knowledge but for your nature. Rowe inhaled slowly. Hold composure, she murmured across the secure channel. The first delegate to rise was a floating column of liquid metal. The representative of the Salakari, an ancient species whose civilization predated the formation of Earth's moon. It shifted into a humanoid form as a courtesy. Humans, your emotional instability is well documented. You form attachments to objects. You cry when your entertainment ends. You name your weapons and sing to your dead. Are you a culture? Or a coping mechanism? A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Biologist Marcus Lee whispered under his breath, and yet we're the unstable ones. Commander Rowe didn't move. Shreya Das, anthropologist and semiotician, blinked twice. The agreed signal for noted but ignore. That was the rule. Let them mock. Let them think you're fragile. Next came the Eulekthi, a collective of gaseous minds contained in a sphere of gravity compression. Their voice was a whistling trill, the translator's voice almost apologetic. We detect no genetic enhancements in your physiology. You have not edited out disease, aging, nor aggression. You rely on crude mechanisms to extend life by decades. Why do you cling to broken biology? Another murmur of derision. On the platform behind Earth's delegation, a flicker of Earth's DNA map appeared, its imperfections circled and read by an alien AI. Then came the Tarvek hive again. A swirl of light, followed by a burst of movement that resembled a hungry windstorm. Your species expels carbon poisons into your own sky. You burn your homeworld to fuel your momentum. Even your alliances are built on mistrust. And yet you come to the stars. Smiling. Another voice added, you war among yourselves, and then send poets to explain it. This one came from the Lmari, a race of memory weavers who communicated in layered dreams. Their delegate, a spider-like being clothed in woven history, gestured toward Earth's cultural archive. The chamber lights dimmed. Without warning, a collage of human history unfolded across the air. A mushroom cloud blooming over Hiroshima. Children in famine, their ribs stark beneath sun-cracked skin. Slave ships, lynchings, gulags, death camps. Soldiers weeping as they held dying comrades in trenches. A man standing in front of a tank in Tiananmen Square. Protesters being silenced. Leaders shouting in rage. A factory collapsing. A forest burning. The light dimmed further. Then a brief scene, a human diplomat hugging a child just before entering the ship. The hologram flickered off. Silence. What are you? The Lmari asked softly, but a contradiction of violence and sentiment. Rowe didn't flinch. They'd expected this. They had submitted Earth's record willingly. Transparency was the only strategy left when your past was that messy. But still, it stung. Ensign Holloway, the youngest member, clenched his jaw. No reaction came. Rose's voice, private and calm. They had practiced for this. They had prepared with AI simulations of ridicule, layered psychoanalysis of probable insults, emotional endurance drills. But those were theoretical. This was not. Now came the judgment phase. The Concorde would offer time for Earth's representatives to respond, but not to argue. That was forbidden. No defense, no denial. Only perspective. The chair floated down to their level. Anvel's three voices merged into one. You have heard how you are perceived. Do you accept this reflection? There was a pause. The room was so quiet, the humans could hear their own pulse in their ears. Commander Rose stepped forward. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't recite from the prepared statement. Instead, she nodded slightly. Yes, she said, voice even. We accept it. The room shifted slightly. Some delegates blinked. A few stiffened. It was not the expected answer. Rowe continued, now letting the translator carry her words across light and mind. We accept that we are deeply flawed. We accept that we are not evolved beyond violence, pettiness, greed, or fear. We accept that we have not cured death or war or the need for power. We accept that our story is still being written, and that we are barely past the prologue. The silence deepened. Rose's eyes met the Telchi's, then the Ilmari's. But we also accept this, that our species can change. That we have survived ourselves again and again. That we have chosen to build bridges from rubble and write songs from grief. That our best moments are never guaranteed. Yet they happen over and over. Despite everything. There was no applause. This was not that kind of chamber. But some attention sharpened. Anvel responded softly. Do you believe this qualifies you for a voice among us? This was the moment. The protocol dictated that she was to express gratitude, humility, and a request for consideration. But she didn't. Instead, Rose simply said, No. But we're not here to ask for a voice. This time, a stir did ripple through the council. No species had ever refused to plead. Not openly. Not like this. Shreya stepped forward. Quietly, steadily. We're here to listen first. To understand what it means to belong here. And when the time comes, if we earn that voice, we'll use it carefully. Because unlike many of you, we still remember what silence cost. Anvel regarded them in stillness for a moment that seemed to stretch across the stars. Then it spoke. Assessment complete. Concord to deliberate. Response to follow. The chamber dimmed. The platforms drifted apart. Earth's disk hovered still, untouched, uninvited, but not ignored. And in the upper galleries, where the lesser species observed from the shadows, a few unseen eyes blinked. For the first time in millennia, a species had accepted its flaws without shame, and dared to stay standing. It was supposed to be a formality. The deliberation period was a bureaucratic pause, a ceremonial breath, where the Concorde's voting blocks considered whether a new species would be granted full council presence, limited observer status, or, more commonly, dismissal with a condescending send-off and a century-long reapplication moratorium. But Earth didn't leave. The Omen's hope remained in orbit. The human team stayed in their chamber. And the Concorde, out of amusement or curiosity, didn't eject them. That's when the games began. The mock gauntlet had ended. Now came the symposium. A misnamed session where the more arrogant member species took turns interrogating Earth's logic, psychology, and ethics. It was called a symposium, but everyone knew it was blood sport. They called it the human condition segment. And they called it the explanation round, but not for humanity's benefit. It was for the others to enjoy. The Telchi delegation began the session. Their representative, a serpentine being of shifting translucence, slithered forward, voice clipped and cold. You speak of empathy as a strength. But your history is rich with betrayal. You forgive only to destroy again. You call it compassion, but it appears to us like weakness without foresight. He blinked slowly. Please explain this contradiction. Marcus Lee, the team's biologist, stepped forward. He wore a rumpled jacket and a tired expression. Empathy isn't a guarantee, he said. It's not in our code. It's a choice. And that makes it rare. And powerful. He adjusted his collar awkwardly. You're used to species who have bred violence out of themselves. We haven't. We just keep trying to act better than our instincts. There was no applause. Only whispers and chemical clouds and electric pulses. Next came the Zyrelian memory choir, a hive of song-thought creatures that pulsed like jellyfish made of vibration. They projected a scene above the chamber, humans grieving, alone, in groups, at funerals, at war memorials, holding photos, writing names on walls. Your mourning rituals are inefficient, illogical. You know the lost are gone. Why create elaborate structures of sadness? Commander Evelyn Rowe answered this one. Because we don't let go easily, she said. Because loss marks us. And because remembering is how we love someone who's no longer there. The memory choir pulsed brighter. You grieve even for animals. Yes, you grieve for strangers. Rowe nodded. Sometimes we grieve for people we've never met. And we sing for them. The memory choir shimmered. Then it said simply. Noted. Then came the fractivo, whose language required a neural lattice just to interface. They presented a challenge, a logic trap encoded in paradox. You know your species is not ready. You admit your faults. And yet you ask for trust. Do you not see this as irrational? Shreya Das took this one. She was tired. Her legs ached. Her heart had been pounding for hours. But she smiled anyway. It is irrational, she said. So is hope. So is falling in love. So is raising a child. So is risking your life for a stranger in a flood. She shrugged. We do irrational things all the time. Some of them are beautiful. That's the point. So you admit to chaos. Absolutely, she said. But not without meaning. Then came the moment that pushed the edge. A Lothari delegate, a being shaped like a swarm of mirrored wings, projected scenes of war crimes from human history. Napalm. Genocide. Gulags. Child soldiers. The images hung in the air like scars given light. You are not a flawed species, it hissed. You are a dangerous one. A long silence followed. Even the memory choir dimmed. Then Rowe walked to the center of their platform and looked directly into the swarm. Yes, she said. We are dangerous. Everyone shifted slightly. But so were you once, she continued. And you didn't stop being dangerous by pretending it wasn't true. You stopped by choosing something else. We're not there yet. But we want to be. That was the key phrase. And the chamber knew it. Wanting to be better. It wasn't an achievement. It was a direction. And that made some species nervous. Because humanity wasn't asking for a seat at the table because they'd arrived. They were asking for the chance to become. And becoming, as history had taught the Concord again and again, was often the most dangerous thing a civilization could do. Then, at the end of the symposium, a delegate from the Vethari ascendancy floated forward. The Vethari rarely spoke. They had transcended physical form eons ago. They were quiet watchers, recorders of patterns, guardians of entropy's edge. When they did speak, everyone listened. The air temperature dropped. The light changed tone. We see in you a species suspended mid-molt, said the Vethari. Still bearing fangs from survival. But growing hands for creation. They paused. But know this, the Concord is not safe. Advancement does not mean peace. Every species here killed something of itself to be present. What are you willing to kill in your nature, humans, to join us? No one answered. Because that wasn't a question meant for now. That was a seed. Planted. Back aboard the Omen's Hope, after the session, Holloway finally exploded in the debrief. Explain yourselves, they say. Then they laugh at everything we do explain. It's like showing a painting to a rock. Shreya nodded, exhausted. It's performance. They're not listening to understand. They're listening to be entertained. But something's changing, Marcus added. Some of them paused. Some of them reacted. Commander Rowe stood, arms crossed. They're watching us like we're a mirror, she said. And some of them don't like what they see in their own reflection. That night, a Telchi aide snuck into the humans' corridor. She claimed to be off duty. She asked, awkwardly, what it felt like to believe in people who constantly let you down. Shreya served her tea. Bitter and strange to the Telchi's taste. But she drank it anyway. She didn't say thank you. But she stayed. And she listened. And on a back-channel data feed, someone had clipped a moment from the symposium. It was Rowe's words, looped and translated into 300 languages. We are dangerous. But we want to be more. It spread. Through military servers. Through cultural archives. Through forbidden AI drift nets. A race that admitted its darkness and still chose to try. Some called it madness. Some called it arrogance. A few called it hope. The council chamber lights had dimmed to their lowest frequency. Only the central petals, each housing a delegation, remained faintly illuminated, like islands of meaning adrift in an ocean of waiting. No one spoke. No one moved. The galactic concord was in sentencing phase. Every species, from the gaseous memory keepers of the Zyrelian choir to the fractal-skinned diplomats of the Telchi Dominion, now observed the same unspoken rule: stillness. Motion, even thought signaling, would influence the quantum hearing receptors of the triune chair Aeonvel. The Concorde's final judgments were rendered from silence. No debate, no lobbying, no persuasion. Just pure calculation. Commander Evelyn Rowe stood motionless on Earth's platform, her hands folded behind her back. Her team stood behind her, 5 humans who had been ridiculed, tested, and slowly transformed from curiosity into anomaly. They weren't sure what came next. Rowe's pulse beat against her neck like war drums. But her expression gave away nothing. The room's silence was oppressive, yet laced with anticipation. The kind that hung just before a storm breaks or a jury foreman stands. Up above, the triune chair began to descend. Aeonvel, an amalgam of 3 species long dead, their neural lattices forever woven into one sentient decision-maker, floated like a glowing prism bleeding thought. No one truly understood Aeonvel. It was said to weigh history like an instinct. It remembered the emotional trajectory of every species ever admitted into the Concorde and projected their likely impact centuries into the future. It wasn't biased. It wasn't merciful. It was balance. Species 0089, Homo sapiens, Aeonvel began in a voice that was neither voice nor language, but experienced as shared knowing. Assessment complete. Emotional volatility, high. Conflict probability, moderate. Empathic development, unstable but accelerating. Historical pattern, recursive trauma response mitigated by social reinvention. Rowe didn't flinch. Capacity for self-reflection, anomalously high. That one did cause a few murmurs across the amphitheater. Capacity for self-correction, not yet proven. Shreya drew in a breath, slow and shallow. Holloway swallowed hard, the sound microscopic in the dead air. Recommendation, observer status. No vote. No tech sharing above Tier 3. Presence permitted under supervision. Reapplication in 1 galactic cycle. The sentence was fair. More than fair. Earth would have access to galactic data but no sway. They could watch, learn, and beg if necessary. They would not speak in votes. Not yet. Aeonvel floated higher. Do you accept this station? Rowe stepped forward. 100 responses waited in her throat. But none came out. Instead, she looked up at the spirals of life above her. The delegates, the laughter from days ago, the dismissive questions, the rituals of mockery. All of it. And something snapped. Quietly. Not with rage. But with a clarity she hadn't expected. She turned her mic on. A soft click. The sound echoed like a bomb. You've asked us to explain ourselves, she said, her voice steady but resonant. You've projected our history, our failings, our contradictions. And you're right. All of it. We've fought, polluted, enslaved, devoured, and scarred our own world. She looked around the chamber. You've shown our pain as proof of unworthiness. She paused. Then smiled, thinly, almost tiredly. But you never once asked what we could be. Some of the delegates leaned forward. Others froze. You judge us by what we are now, she said, but we came here knowing we were not your equals. We came here knowing we'd be mocked. Knowing we'd be tested. Knowing you'd try to break us. She let that settle. Then. But you made one mistake. The room tightened, silent. You assumed this is us at our best. There it was. The line. The sentence that cracked the mirror the Concorde had been using to look down at Earth. A murmur started, not from sound but from subthought, from shared frequency. Delegates sent invisible signals to one another. What did she just say? The Telchi delegate narrowed its gaze. The Zyrelian choir pulsed with surprise. Commander Rowe continued. This is us at our most cautious. Our most polite. Our most rehearsed. But it's not our best. She turned to gesture toward her team. Our best doesn't come when we're calm. It comes when everything's on fire. When the world ends. When the lights go out and someone needs to stand in the dark anyway. Now the chamber felt smaller. Closer. The stillness wasn't silence now, it was attention. We didn't bring warriors or engineers because we thought you wanted to see our strength. We brought storytellers. Caretakers. Historians. Because that's who we are trying to become. She let the mic drop to her side. Not literally but symbolically, the way only a human can. Then turned and walked off the platform. The chamber exploded, not in noise but in neural traffic. Psychic flashbursts. Holographic whispers. Rapid translations. Aeonvel hovered, undecided for the first time in memory. On a level far above, the Vethari, those eternal observers, recorded a new line in their timelines. They do not speak like other species, one thought aloud. They narrate, another answered. They weaponize story. And they just turned a sentence into a challenge. In the private chambers beyond the council floor, several envoys summoned their aides. Have our archives re-reviewed. Search for additional anomalies in Earth's transmission history, the Telchi diplomat ordered. Something's off. Dilmari, once smug, now trembled beneath their memory veils. She did not argue. She did not defend. She invited doubt. And the Tarvek hive began folding new strategies into their diplomatic models. Back on the Omen's Hope, Ro removed her jacket and finally allowed herself to sit. Marcus said nothing but slid a tin of mints across the table. A peace offering. Shreya just stared at the wall. That line, she whispered. You didn't write that line. No, Ro said. I didn't. So who did? There was a long pause. Then Holloway answered. We all did, he said. Every time someone on Earth kept going even when they shouldn't have. Elsewhere, on thousands of distant worlds, the Concord's decision began streaming. Clip. Translated. Spun. But the phrase remained intact. You think this is us at our best? Some laughed. Some scoffed. But others leaned forward for the first time. The transmission spread like wildfire. Across neural bands, wormhole-laced subnets, and crystalline broadcast webs, the clip was replayed billions of times in 1,000 forms. You think this is us at our best? Simple. Defiant. A line from a species barely worthy of interstellar kindergarten. And yet it pierced the membranes of even the most ancient minds. Some species called it arrogance. Others called it prophecy. For many, it was the first time in millennia they'd felt something when listening to a speech. Not data. Not protocol. But something alive. Commander Ro hadn't expected a response. Back on the Omen's Hope, she sat in her quarters, the overhead light flickering slightly, a reminder of their barely threshold fusion power core. They hadn't been contacted since her outburst. No summons. No reprimand. Just silence. Not from her team, though. Shreya was pacing in the narrow corridor, muttering fragments of alien dialects. Holloway had started replaying the broadcast on a loop, counting the frames where specific delegates flinched. Marcus had taken to staring out the porthole, murmuring names of Earth's extinct species, as if grounding himself in loss. It wasn't fatigue that weighed them down now. It was possibility. And that was heavier than failure. Then the alert came. Not a message. A summons. The council wanted them back in the chamber. No. No deliberation. No formality. Just a glowing corridor waiting outside the airlock and an escort. This time not an AI orb but a representative of the Vedhari themselves. A being of drifting light and gravity halos. That alone shook the team. The Vedhari didn't move unless the axis of history bent. Ro's stomach tightened as they walked. The chamber had changed. Gone was the dim, condescending light. Now every pedal platform glowed softly with golden bioluminescence. And something else. Attendance. Full. No proxies. No silent representatives. Every species that mattered, and some that hadn't shown up in centuries, were present. Even the veiled ones, long considered extinct, floated in the upper rings like translucent ghosts. Earth's disk hovered again at the center, but this time the gravity net was tighter. Sharper. This wasn't ceremony. This was focus. Anvel descended with no preamble. No poetry. Its triune voice resonated instantly. You have destabilized the decision field. Pause. This has not occurred in over 70 cycles. Another pause. Explain yourselves. The team exchanged glances. Marcus shook his head slightly as if to say we already did. Shreya stepped forward. She didn't prepare. She didn't breathe deeply. She just spoke. Earth has never been at its best in comfort. We evolve in emergencies. In crisis. Every leap we've made came at the edge of extinction. Not because we're brave, but because we're cornered. She held out her hand as if offering something invisible. We don't belong here yet. You're right about that. But you've never seen what we become when we're not being polite. When we're not pretending we're ready. When we're desperate. She looked up. And we're always desperate. Silence again. Then came the visuals. Without warning, a projection flared in the space above them. But it wasn't from the Concorde. It was from Earth. From civilians. Students. Artists. Journalists. Hackers. The signal wasn't authorized. The Omen's Hope hadn't sent it. It had leaked. Somehow Earth had intercepted the council stream and begun feeding back. A boy in rural Kenya building a water pump from scrap. A woman in India teaching girls to code by lantern light. A rescue team in Brazil pulling strangers from a flood. Protesters in Belarus shielding each other from riot shields. Doctors performing surgery in a war zone, smiling through exhaustion. Children drawing the stars on cracked pavement. A jazz quartet playing inside a ruined subway tunnel. There were no narrations, only moments. Then came one last clip. A teacher, middle-aged with graying hair, pointing up at the sky through a broken telescope and telling her students they'll laugh. But keep watching. We'll surprise them. The chamber dimmed. Even Aonvel paused. Unauthorized transmissions. Yes, Ro replied. That's the point. We don't do Unity on command. We do it when no one thinks we can. A flicker passed through the crystalline Telchi ambassador. For the first time its face softened. The Tarvek hive adjusted their colors to neutral. The Zyrelian choir emitted a long, sustained tone, a harmonic found only in morning rituals. The council was grieving. But not for Earth. They were grieving the moment they realized Earth might be worth fearing. Avet Hari stepped forward. It had no face, no mouth, but everyone heard it. If this is you at your beginning, what will you be when you arrive? Ro didn't answer. She simply nodded. Later, far away, the Concord would not revise its official judgment. Observer status, maintained. No vote, no weapons tech, no council authority. But one line was added, an amendment not seen in 10,000 cycles. Species 0089, Earth. Provisional Ascension Candidate. Status to be revisited upon planetary crisis response or cultural divergence event. Unofficially it meant, we're watching. Closely. Back aboard the Omen's Hope, the team sat in silence. No champagne. No cheers. Just the hum of a ship that barely held together. Think they got the message? Holloway muttered. Ro leaned back watching the stars. Oh, they got it, she said. Now they're trying to figure out if it's a threat. Shreya chuckled darkly. It is. Marcus nodded. They just don't know. If it's to them or to ourselves. Later that week, Earth's Signal Archive recorded an encrypted data burst from an unknown relay station orbiting Alpha Centauri. It contained no message. Just a single image. A human child. Smiling. Wearing a shirt that said, "This isn't even our final form."